Okay, cool. So, welcome to my first video in like 6 years. I think it was 6 years since that Turbine Tube video. By the way, all of those of you that jumped on my YouTube channel and subscribed, I think it was like 40 or so within the first week or so. That was awesome. I seriously appreciate that. Feel free to share these videos. Feel free to post comments in the space below and stuff. Now, I'm still a little bit new to the whole YouTube thing, so I mean, I watch a lot of YouTube videos, but I've never recorded stuff to be on video all the time. So, but here we go. So you're going to see a strange mix of stuff in this shop because not only do I work on boats in this shop, but I also work on guns. I work on fishing gear. I work on a ton of other stuff. I got all kinds of stuff that comes across my bench. But it's cool now because I'm back to building again, and so most of my bench is being taken up by boat stuff. So as we go along here, I've got several builds that you're going to see several builds in various stages. I've got two 8 scale builds. One of them is a nitro, one of them is an FE, and then I've got 2 gas. But the principles apply to all of them equally, basically, with regards to making parts and all of that type of stuff. The turbine tube video, that applies to gas and FE as well. Although when we get to the second video, which has the aft deck and all of that type of stuff, it'll probably be a little bit different for FE, but we'll get to that when we get into that video. So a couple things that guys have been asking so far. I've gotten Facebook messages, I've gotten emails, I've gotten all kinds of cool stuff. One guy wanted to know about doing my Mylar method with the carbon fiber on the turbine tubes. He wanted to know if I could make, or if he could make sheets of carbon fiber or glass out of that. Yeah, you can. It kind of depends on what you're wanting to make that sheet for. If you're wanting to make like shim material for, like, I don't know, your turn fin or whatever, say you don't have your turn fin quite dialed in, I use some of that sheeted glass or sheeted carbon fiber to shim the fin one way or the other until I get the right angle. Then I can measure the angle, and then I'll make that part out of aluminum to slide in behind the fin. But as far as something larger like decking goes, if you want to go down to, I don't know, say a 1/32nd, because even Don Mock did it in one of his videos. He was using really thin sheeted fiberglass material for his decking, and that video was what, 30 years ago, 30 some odd years ago, almost maybe 40 years ago. Shoot, I don't even remember when he did those, and I still got a copy of those, by the way, and yeah, they're all digitized. But yeah, and a lot of the stuff that he did in those videos too is still, still applies to this day. But that sheeted material, you can buy that stuff. We actually have a place, it's over towards the Bay Area, in the Livermore area, called Aerospace Composites, or ACP Composites. You can buy sheeted material down to 1/32nd of an inch. So it's probably better that you do it that way, because if you try to do the Mylar method like I showed you in the turbine tube video, it might come out a little bit consistent. You might have some dips and wows that you really don't want. So if you can find a place, and like Don Mock said, when he was doing his video, he said he got it from Ron Jones Racing, or Jones Racing. And so I'm sure there's places, around you where you can get that material. But yeah, by all means, if you want to do your decking in that, that's great. My recommendation would be, and you'll see a version of this when we get into other stuff, a 32nd of an inch, in my opinion, is just a little bit too thin. If you're going to go that thin, I would overlay it with a very thin layer of carbon fiber. Almost every single boat I've had, with the exception of, I take that back. So the wood boats that I had didn't have the carbon fiber overlay, because those were already, 1/16 inch or more to begin with, actually. One of them, when I bought it, was way more than a 1/16 of an inch. But in any case, all the wing boats that I've had, my Exide, my Circus, the other Circus that you'll see in subsequent videos, all of those have all had a layer of carbon fiber on the deck that we laminated on the deck. And you're going to say, what about weight? What about weight? What about weight? Let me tell you something about weight. I know you've seen other videos where it's being preached about, you got to be light, you got to be light, you got to be light. Okay, well, that's cool to a certain extent, but, and I have proof to back this up, sometimes too light, you can be too light. Honestly, you can be too light. And I'll tell you who the Too Light guys are. And I've seen it in a number of classes. I've seen it from Scale. I've seen it in Gas Cracker Box. I've seen it in Gas Cats. I've seen it in Gas Sport Hydros. There is such a thing as being too light. And what ends up happening is the boats that are too light, they can't handle the chop and they can't handle a little bit of wind. They're not going to last. One of two things is going to happen. You'll either get first or second place, or you'll be over on your back, upside down. That's usually how it ends up going. I've seen it in a number of classes. It is one of the constants in the universe. There is such a thing as being too light in this hobby. I prefer having a boat that is a little bit sturdier and a little bit more durable. You're going to see some of the stuff that I do, and you're going to go, oh, dude, my God, that's just adding way too much weight. Not really. You'd be surprised at how much I've overbuilt stuff, and yet the turbine tube, for example, I did get a couple of comments about that saying, hey, man, that just adds too much weight. And I said, no, not really. I said, the turbine tube that you saw that I held up in that video, do you know how much that weighed? And he's like, no. And I said, that was 2.1 ounces. You add the chrome vinyl around it, and it only adds maybe another ounce. So you only added 3 ounces, maybe. You can save that 3 ounces somewhere else in the boat. I've seen other videos where, guys have used aluminum or brass tubing in place of using the neoprene tubing. And yeah, it saved them some weight. So if you're that conscious about weight, and I'm not going to say that I'm not conscious about weight, but I'm not uber conscious about it, because I would rather have a boat that handles much better. And basically, all of my boats handled like a Cadillac. All my wing boats, you can literally take your hand off the wheel coming down the straightaway. If you're out doing some testing, you can take your hand off the wheel coming down the straightaway. That boat tracks straight. It will not move. And I'll explain more as we go along in these videos. But here's the other thing about being too light. The boat can be an absolute rocket, but if you can't control the thing, and this is what I've seen a lot with super, super light boats. Super light boats are really, really hard to control. So what would you rather have? Would you rather have a little bit more control on your boat and sacrifice a little bit of weight? Or do you want something that's going to be searching for lanes and just absolutely a monumental pain in the butt to control? I've seen that with super light boats all over the place. I've raced in Southern California. I've raced here. I've raced in the Pacific Northwest with the guys from RCU. I've raced in Utah. I've raced in New Mexico. Raced in Texas once. Raced in Florida once. So I've seen it all over the place. I'm a pretty well-traveled racer. But I will tell you this, I've got specific examples of winged boats that were considerably heavier than non-wing boats and still won, and won handily. My Circus and my Exide were both examples of that. Those boats, they probably were around anywhere between 14 and 15 pounds. Well, I take that back. The Exide was 16 pounds at one point, but I took that boat and put it on a diet because there was a lot of resin and other crap that was in the boat that I ground out of there. I lightened up the wings. I lightened up the flaps on the canard. I did a lot of stuff to lighten that boat up. Because when I first got it, that's a boat that I rebuilt. That was a boat that was originally built by Troy McIntyre and Jim Rogers up in Washington in 1998. So I put that boat on a serious diet. When I got it and I put it all back together and rebuilt the boat with new wings and everything, that boat was topping 16 pounds. But even at 16 pounds, that boat was still doing low to mid 60s. It was still extremely competitive. And I believe I set a district fast time, our district, NAMBA District 9 here. I set a district fast time with that boat that actually stood for a couple of years. I was just over a minute 20 with that. And I know I turned heats that were lower than a minute 20. It just never got recorded. I'm not a big fast time guy, but I will tell you this. The boat was it was heavier than most. I know a lot of wing boats that are considerably lighter that were in the 12 to 14 pound range. And yet this boat was just as competitive because this boat ran efficiently. Chop didn't bother it as much. Wind didn't bother it as much. So we're going to cover all that as we go through these videos. So I want you to keep I want you to keep the whole being light thing kind of in perspective. Yeah, light is good, but being durable is good too. And something that I'm going to show you through all of this video here and subsequent videos, because I'm going to break this up into a couple, is the wings that I'm making right now. They're going to be light, but they're also going to be super durable. And I'm going to show you a wing system on how to mount them to the boat where you're not going to be destroying wings and you're not going to be destroying the boat, and you're still not going to be sacrificing that much weight. So let's get right to it. So here, I'm in the middle of making wings and wing molds right now. I'm making plugs for the 1993 Miss Circus that I'm doing, the 1993 backup boat, which is the 8401 hull. That's the one that started life as an Atlas. It was a Miller, it was a Circus, it was an American Spirit. I'm trying to remember what else it was before it became a Circus. It was an Exide. My Exide boat was the 8401. It was the backup hull, not the two wing. But yeah, that boat had many, many incarnations, but still. So yeah, we're gonna show you how to make wings light, make wings extremely durable, and then we're gonna show you the wing system. Why do I want to have a boat with wings? Well, be quite honest with you, man. All the boats that I'm attracted to, I shouldn't say all of them, because I did have a pay and pack little buzzard shovel nose. I think that was the only shovel nose I ever had. But I also had a 78 Circus, the rear cockpit Jones pickle fork. And what attracts me to a boat? Oh, let me back up just a step first. Scale has always been kind of one of two camps. You have racers, and then you have modelers, and then you have a handful of guys that are both. They can build a beautiful boat that is extremely competitive and extremely durable. I'd like to think that I'm that guy, because I've built boats that, have been extremely beautiful. They've been extremely competitive, won a lot of races. My Exide won numerous races and a district championship. My son started driving that boat after he graduated from the old Miller boat that he had, which you'll hear stories about that one later. But anyway, he won numerous races with it. He didn't win enough races, or he didn't race enough races to win a district championship, but he still drove the hell out of that boat. Absolutely drove the hell out of it. He drove that boat right to the edge of its capabilities, much like I did. But the way the boat was built and the way the boat was rebuilt, you could do that. You could push that boat right to the edge of its capabilities and just absolutely smoke other people. But like I say, the boats that I was attracted to are all wing boats. I'm not a fan of... I do like shovel noses, I will say that. There's quite a few shovel noses that I love that are beautiful boats. A lot of rear cockpit Jones pickle forks I like and such. I'm not a fan of some of the other non-wing boats. Like the 8255s are okay. I'm not a fan of automotive hulls. And the reason I'm not a fan of these hulls is they were not successful boats as a real boat. Maybe one or two of them won a couple of races, but they were not successful boats as a real boat. In fact, a lot of these boats didn't even qualify. So I kind of tend to stay away from that type of stuff. If that makes me a purist, then so be it. But there's a reason that they were not successful boats. The only boat that I can think of that was successful as an RC boat and not as a real boat was the 81 Circus Canard. And there were only a handful of guys that really got that boat. In fact, there was a guy here that had one of those boats back in the day. And he made it from the Bill Fritz molds, which I believe now Steve Galtieri has. That boat was ballistic, absolutely ballistic. But that boat was totally crap as a real boat. A lot of these other boats, the 8255s, I know a lot of guys run those, and that's cool and all, but that's kind of not what Scale's all about. I'm tied to a boat. I'm interested in a boat either because I'm attracted to the color scheme, or more importantly, in my particular case, I'm attracted to the driver. I'm a fan of drivers. I was a huge Bill Muncy fan, even though I didn't get to see a lot of him before he passed. But I'm a monster Chip Hanauer fan. Chip Hanauer was one of my childhood heroes. In fact, I got to meet Chip at the NAMA Nationals in Washington in 2014, and he and I talked for, about an hour and a half after the race. It was fantastic. Signed autographs for me and such. and I happen to be building the nitro boat that you're going to see later is the 89 Miss Circus backup boat. In fact, another 8401 hull, but this one has a great story behind it too, which is why I'm attracted to it. It's not just because it's a Circus. I've been a Circus guy for years. But in any case, so let's get into the building of wings. Okay. I'm going to show you how to lay out a wing. I'm going to show you how to set up a plug so that you can mold that plug so that you can have your own wings. Well, guys actually asked me too. They said, why do you do your own wing molds? Why don't you just buy some from somebody else? I've never been good at relying on other people for parts. Every single one of my wing boats, I have molds to make the wings. Some of them I have the mold to make the cowls and the cockpit. I even have a vacuum box to make the windshields that go into the fiberglass cockpit. So I don't like relying on other people because who knows how long it's going to take for you to get another pair of wings. Say if you go to a race and you blow it over backwards and you destroy a wing or even both of them, or even all three of them. Well, how long is it going to take you to get a new set of wings, get the halves put together, and get it ready to race? Even if it's not painted, how long is that going to take you? Me having my own molds, you know how much faster I got a wing put together? I could come home from a race. I could have a single vert. Laid up in the molds, both halves, put together. I could have the one piece out of the mold in a day. If I blew up two, I could have a whole new set in 2 days. I could have those fit to the boat, drilled, ready to go, maybe in primer before the next race. If you're not making your own wings, you may not be able to do that because you may not even be able to get any wings from, one of these boat builders. So that's why I rely on my own. All right, so let's get into how we make the wing plug. Couple of things. So this right here that I just held up, this is actually a piece of vinyl from my graphics shop. I actually drew out the wing on my computer, set it to 1/8 scale, and then upscaled it 20% from there for gas scale. I do the same thing for 10 scale. I downscale them 20%. And I make sure the measurements are correct on the 8th scale before I do any sizing up or down. So this is a piece of vinyl. I simply printed this out and just cut it by hand. Something else you're going to need, go to Home Depot, Lowe's, or wherever, and just get some of this pink foam. You'll find it back in the insulation section. This is polystyrene. It sands real well. You don't need to go out and spend a ton of money on that like sculpting foam, or what's the other one that I used to get? The blue foam. I think I still have some of the blue foam up here. Spider foam is what I used to get from Aerospace Composites. It was closed cell foam, but it was extremely expensive. It was a real pain in the butt. So anyway, go get yourself some pink foam. You can print out an outline on a piece of paper. I just do it on my vinyl because I can stick it right to the foam, and then I can run it through the belt sander and trim it to fit. All right. You're going to need some of that. You're also going to need, and I don't know if I have any on the counter, you're also going to need some real thin fiberglass cloth. And that's this right here. This is 3/4 ounce fiberglass cloth. And I use this because when you're making the mold and you cover it with the surfacing primer, and I'll show you a surfacing primer here in a second. I'll show you the products that I use. There is such a product that they make from Duratec where you can spray it right on the foam. I don't like doing that because I've seen too many times where it just flat eats the foam, and then you got to go back and resand another part. So there it is right there. You're also going to need some tooling gel coat, which I'll show you what it looks like. I'll tell you where to get it. I'll tell you how to apply it because we're going to break this up into several parts. I'm going to show you how to make the plugs first, and then I'm going to show you how to mold them. And then once they're molded, I'm going to show you how to finish out the mold so that you can start making your own parts. Then I'm going to show you how to do the mounting system to the boat, because the mounting system to the boat, it's not something that I developed. I actually learned it from two other guys that were using that same system. But I improved on it a little bit, made it a little bit lighter, but it's extremely strong. You don't have to worry about ripping the deck out of your boat because it's going to be up underneath the deck and it goes all the way to the bottom of the boat. So you're going to have strength holding that wing on. I'm going to show you my wing systems, and I don't have a boat. Well, actually I do. Up there on the shelf when you'll see it in another video here, but the 89 Circus backup that I'm building, you can literally lift the boat by the wings. Now the wings only held together by nylon bolts, 440 nylon screws. You can literally lift up the boat by the wings, but if it goes over backwards, those screws will break and everything comes right off. You simply back the screen or the bolt that's broken. You back it out of the mount, put another one in, and you're ready to go. And you're not breaking wings, and you're not breaking the deck off your boat. You're not screwing a whole bunch of things up. But like I say, I've refined it a little bit from when I first learned it, and I'll show you all of that stuff too. Some guys are going to say that's overbuilding. Well, that's me. That's what I like to do. All right, so let's get right to it. So one of the cool things about doing these videos is I finally figured out something to do with my GoPro 8. My regular business, other than the graphic shop actually is not my regular business, even though it likes to think that it is. My regular business actually is audio visual, and I've got a number of cameras and other stuff that I use for a lot of aerial video. I've got several drones. I do a lot of inspection. I do a lot of other stuff as well, but I also do sports video and commercial video, a lot of product demonstration videos and other stuff. Anyway, so here's I got a great great deal for using my GoPro 8 because I upgraded to the GoPro 10s and 11s. I have a 10 and an 11, or two 10s and 11. I'm sorry, mainly because they shoot action much better, but this is a little bit slower. It doesn't do action as well, so this is perfect for this video. So I got my little head worn mount, and here we go. All right, so here's what we're making. These are the beginnings of the wing plugs for my 93 Circus. These still need to be trimmed up, still need to be finish sanded. This is the long side, because remember that 93 Circus has a short and a long vert. Okay, so there's the long vert right there. Here's the short vert. I still have to finish sand those and trim those up. That's what we're making. Okay, so now what we're doing too, we're also making some gas wings. Okay, this is the template for the Lucero, or excuse me, for the Jones gas wings that we're going to do for the 89 Circus gasser that I'm building. I had an 89 Circus Nitro, but I've since have sold that. I sold most of my Nitro stuff is gone, except for one boat's going to still be Nitro. But this one right here, this is going to be my gasser. So basically, you're going to take a chunk of that foam. I'm going to peel the backing off of this this vinyl. This is just the standard garden variety vinyl that I use for making most everybody's decals. A lot of the printed stuff that I'm doing for everybody comes on this right here. So we're basically going to lay that down on there so that sticks on there. Now you can take it over to your belt sander and you can trim it. Okay, so I went ahead and trimmed these up with my did I say belt sander in the first? I think I did say belt sander, didn't I? No, I went ahead and trimmed these up with the bandsaw. Trimmed them right, close to the edge, not terribly close, because you're going to end up sanding a lot of that anyway. And then this little notch here at the trailing edge, that I did with the bandsaw. So we've got two halves here. I went ahead and split them in half. Now there's a couple ways you can do this too, because this foam is, I believe it's, what is it, 1 inch thick or 1.5 inch thick? Anyway, you can do it a number of ways. You can split it in half using, you can use a hacksaw blade and simply, you can mark your center on the wing, okay? And then you can actually take and just very gently go down through. You can use a coping saw if you have one that's big enough. There's a variety of ways you can do this. Honestly, I use this thing right here. It's a fillet knife, an old fillet knife off my fishing boat. It's super sharp, holds an edge, and it does really well on this foam. Okay, so go ahead and then you'll split your wing in half. Okay, once you've got it split in half, you can flip it over. This is what it looked like in the middle. Okay, you're gonna, oh my God, I'm gonna deal with all of that. Well, you're gonna sand a bunch of that crap off. Okay, basically what you're gonna end up doing is, and you're gonna need a couple of these bad boys right here, some just good old 3M sanding blocks. Okay, you can see this one. I've used this one a ton already on those ones over there. You're gonna start shaping your wings. Think of this as sculpting. You're going to start shaping your wings. This foam is very easily sandable. Okay, this is going to be your leading edge right here. Okay, and just kind of go lightly. You don't have to worry about really pushing down hard. You don't want to push down hard on this sand anyway, or excuse me, on this foam anyway. but this is going to sand out real nice, okay? You can already see that it's smoothing up pretty good. I'm just using 60 grit for the initial part of this sanding phase, and then eventually you're going to go to 150 and maybe some 220. But you're going to sand this all the way down, and you're going to go around. I typically will rotate it every once in a while, just to make sure that we're going straight. The other cool part too is, and I don't know if I have any of them handy or not here, but if you want to make a longer block sander, you can do it out of wood. I have some really cool angle around here somewhere that I bought from a surplus store up in Sacramento, that makes really good sanding bars. Basically, you can just glue your sandpaper right to the sanding bar, and then once you're done, just you take some CA, glue it on there. When you're done, just peel it off. You can take a knife, peel it off, and then replace it with another one after you get whatever dried CA is still on there. But see, this is sanding fairly fine. This is going to be your rough sanding right here with the 60. And as you can see, this trailing edge is already starting to thin up pretty good. And you're going to get rid of all of this crap on the top. Don't even worry about that. I know there's a lot of you that are sitting there going, oh God, man, this is a ton of work. Well, honestly, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but it's going to save you a lot of work later. Trust me when I tell you that if you're going to run wing boats, it's really cool to have your own molds. And trust me, it took me a long time to learn all of this stuff too. I didn't learn all of this stuff overnight. But I'm taking everything that I've learned from probably, 8 or 10 different people on fiberglass molding. I'm going to show you some products that you may or may not have seen before that make working with fiberglass a lot easier. Okay, see, your rough sanding, it's actually coming off fairly fine. But like I say, you don't want to push on it real hard. You just want it enough to, it's going to take you a while. What's cool about this is I can actually sand out a plug, or sand out the foam for a plug for a pair of wings in about an hour and a half, 2 hours. I can get it ready to lay glass, and that's where you're going to take that 3/4 ounce glass. And you can get that there's a bunch of different places you can get. I frequent a place here called Tap Plastics. They are all over the place. I don't know if they're nationwide, but they are fairly regional, at least around here. The 11 western states, there's Tap Plastics all over the place. Back east, I'm sure you have something similar back there. Just look for fiberglass and fiberglass equipment, and you'll find a place that's similar to a Tap Plastics. See how that trailing edge is thinning up? And you're going to want to look at that edge every once in a while just to make sure that you're fairly even, because like I say, this is sculpting, man. It's you're going to want to do an aerofoil type shape. So, like these up here, this is an aerofoil type shape. I sanded these out. I believe it or not, I sanded out the plugs. I sanded out these plugs for that particular wing in about an hour and a half. This one may go a little bit longer because I got some bigger divots in here, but all of this crap I will sand right through, because I'm going to be thinning this wing out as I'm sanding it, because you don't want these things super thick. Although the gassers are going to be a little bit thicker than the 8 scale, obviously. Okay, so here we are, roughly, I don't know, not quite 2 hours later, and there's our 2 sanded halves. And look how much I thinned out that depth that we had before. Okay, there's the backside. I've already pulled off the vinyl that I used to do the template for this, but there's our 2 halves right there. Okay, basically sanded them down. Now remember one thing when you're doing this, and you couldn't see me while I was doing it, but before I started doing my sanding, always remember to wear some breathing protection with this. If it's not an N95, wear a painter's mask, wear something, because this particulate, when you're sanding it, trust me, you don't want to get this up in your sinuses, because it gets funky real fast. So make sure you're wearing some kind of a breathing protection. N95, if you possibly can. They're a whole lot easier to get these days than they were a couple of years ago, that's for sure. But yeah, by all means, wear some breathing protection, because I mean, you can clearly see how much. What the hell's going on here? You can clearly see how much is you can clearly see how much is on the table here where I've been sanding, you know, and look how much, you know, you're gonna be breathing that crap. So you don't want to be breathing that. So by all means, wear some protection when you're breathing. But there they are right there. Okay, so we are going to prep these up for laying some glass on them. All right, I'm going to do this one last step in this video, and then in the next video, we'll start talking about mounting them to a parting board, and because you got a whole lot more sanding to do. Like I say, this is 60 with some 150 over the top of it. Oh, by the way, remember when you're doing this to put your halves together and make sure that your edges are trued up as you're doing this. Okay, make sure your edges get trued up. And, you know, you can trim a little off here, trim a little off there. That's why I make these I make these about 1/8 of an inch oversize on the template, because I know I'm going to be taking material off. And there's that notch right there in the back. I know I'm going to be taking material off, and it's always better to take material off than have to add material, which you can later, which actually we're going to be, and I'll show you why. Okay, see that little dimple right there? Okay, you don't need to worry about being super perfect on the finish on these, because this is just foam. This is just going to give us our basic form. Now we're going to cover this with a thin layer of glass before we get ready to mount this to a parting board. And I know you're sitting there going, okay, what's a parting board? All right, well, this piece of melamine right here, this is a parting board. You can actually buy this at Home Depot. In fact, there's the tag for it right there. You can buy this at Home Depot. It's what is it? It's what is it? It's roughly 12 inches long by about 3/4 of an inch thick. This is going to be a parting board. You're actually going to mount these parts to the board, okay, like so. You're going to glue that sucker on there. We're going to get a little bigger one for these because these wings are bigger. But you're going to glue this right to the board, and this is what you're going to spray the surfacing primer. And I'll show you the surfacing primer in the next video. I'll show you the surfacing primer, the tooling gel, and everything else in the next video. Because basically what this is going to look like is, okay, see, this is what it looks like after we put a layer of glass on the wing. See, now that's nice and solid, and you're not going to have any worries about the surfacing primer eating your foam. Okay, these I still have to sand up. But anyway, we're gonna lay some glass on this. I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm just going to use some old West Systems. I've got some old hardener, some old 206 hardener that I need to use up. But we're going to use that all on this, and some 3/4 ounce glass, and the Mylar. Remember the Mylar that we had in the turbine tube video? Yeah, Mylar, we can use Mylar for all kinds of stuff, and I'll tell you why. If you do this laying on Mylar, it's so easy to just pull this off at the very end. You just pull the Mylar right off, and it doesn't stick. Just whoosh, off, it's done, okay? So there it is right there, all right? So let's go get some glass, and we'll start laying this out. So there's our two halves, and let me get these out of the way here real quick. There's our two halves. Laying on some melamine. There's our favorite melamine right there. There's two things that I buy pretty much in bulk. That is Mylar. And did I say melamine or Mylar? Anyway, I buy Mylar, and I buy a lot of 3/4 ounce glass because I use it for a lot of different things. Okay, so let's lay out our 3/4 ounce glass. This is basically, you can call it Vail, you can call it whatever you want. But if you go into a place like Tap Plastics or any other supplier that handles fiberglass cloth and such, 0.75 ounce glass, that's all you got to do when you go in there and ask for it. All right, so I've mixed up a few pumps of West Systems epoxy, and I'm using the 206 hardener. And if you're looking at this wondering why it's brown, it's because the hardener is very old. This is a good way to get rid of old hardener. I mean, old hardener will still work. But if you don't like the brown color and such, well, this is a good thing to use it for, is making parts like this. Okay, so you're going to want to wet this out. And don't be bashful about using the epoxy on this, because we're making the plug for the mold here. This is not, I mean, you can even just pour this on there like that and just wet it out from there. As long as it's getting through to the styrofoam, you're okay. Or the polyurethane foam, whatever you want to call it. Polystyrene, excuse me. In any case, wet it out. And you're going to want to wet this out really good. Let it soak in really good. Because a lot of this resin, like that little dimple that I showed you earlier, and I forget which one it's on now because I can't see it. But in any case, the resin will help fill some of those dimples and other crap that, you know, maybe you did in your sanding process that showed up, okay? And even if it doesn't fill them completely, you're still going to go back and you're going to do some filling before you actually do the surfacing primer anyway. You still got a lot more sanding to go. We're not even close to done on the sanding yet. But the cool part about this is, you know, this is you're not going to do any more sanding after this. Once you start making your parts, you'll do a little bit of finish sanding, but your stuff's going to come out of the mold. It's going to come out of the mold with a finish, you know, similar to this right here. I know this is all jacked up because it's got wax and shit all over it, but still, you know, this is going to come out really, really nice. And this was a vacuum bagged part too. I did a lot of vacuum bagging. I've done some of the vacuum infusion that's going on now. And it's cool and all. As far as that goes, because I know that seems to be all the rage these days, is this vacuum infusion stuff. And there is some pros and cons to it, just like there is to vacuum bagging. The big one for me is that it just wastes so much resin. There's just no two ways about it. It wastes a ton of resin. And for doing parts like this, yeah, unless you've got unless you've made several molds off the same plug and you're making a number of parts at the same time, it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of cost prohibitive to vacuum bag it or even vacuum infuse it because you're wasting so much resin. So just a regular wet layup is fine. Besides, when we get done with all of this, I'm going to show you how when we mold this, or when we have the mold made and you start making your parts, we're going to go through and we're actually going to make the wing one piece. It's not going to come out in halves. You're going to make it as one piece, which I know some of you are like, how the hell do you do that? Well, if you marry the mold up right and you have your indexing marks, usually I make some bolt holes so I can either bolt it or clamp it together. But if you make some holes or some dimples or whatever so that your molds will line up correctly, you mold this all out as one piece. These two halves, you'll bolt them together. I do bolt holes most of the time. You know, you'll take your two halves and you'll just tack them together real quick. You'll put the mold together, put the two halves of the mold together, and then you'll drill your lineup holes while those two halves are together over your plug parts. So anyway, yeah, just wet this all out. Don't be bashful. You're gonna have a few little bubbles here and there. Just go through and smooth them out, which is part of the reason why you're using the 206 and not a 205. I mean, at the time I'm doing this video, most of the country is still frickin' frozen, including California. California is not although it's getting a little bit warmer here anyway. The days are getting into, one of my neighbors walking by, walking his kid around. But anyway, at least the days here now are getting into the probably the mid 50s and even 60s in some cases. Although next week it's going to suck and I'm not going to be able to do anything for a couple of days because the daytime highs are not even going to get to 50 degrees. And in California, that's flipping ridiculous. I know some of you back east are just kind of going, dude, really? You're bitching about that? You know, yeah, I am bitching about that, man. California doesn't get that cold, at least not here in the valley where I'm at. You go up around Tahoe and stuff, and yeah, the mornings are down in the teens and stuff. But still, it's just we're not used to, at least here on the valley floor where I'm at. I'm just about 38 miles or so south of Sacramento, so I'm on the valley floor. Which the funny part was, and some of you already know because I'm sure you saw it on the news, we were getting our asses kicked by rain, which was cool and all. I don't mind the rain, but just spread it out a little bit. But we were getting it all at once, which was kind of a problem. But that's kind of the way California weather goes. I've been here my entire life, man, and as a former water rescuer, former first responder, the pattern that the weather takes here in California is kind of odd. I mean, we get some dry years and then all of a sudden we'll just get hammered. Now this wasn't as bad as previous years. Some previous years were flipping ridiculous. 2016, 2017 were bad. 1997 was a real bad one. 1986, back when I was in high school, was a real bad one. We were talking about dam failures and all kinds of other silly stuff. Yeah, see, that wants to wrinkle up there a little bit and just go back and smooth it out. And like I say, some of this resin is gonna, once this is all done, you're gonna trim this all back to the edges again and a little more finish sanding. But the cool part is a lot of this resin is gonna fix some of the imperfections in your foam, which, you know, no big deal. You're gonna go back later on anyway. Once you spray some surfacing primer on here, and by the way, I should have gotten that out of the box. Surfacing primer is made by a company called Duratec, and it is made specifically for doing exactly what I'm doing right here, making parts, making molds. So you can make a finished part, essentially. I'm just gonna dump a bunch of this on there and wet it out. We don't need to be bashful. We're making a plug, not an actual part. By the way, one of the questions somebody had asked me a long time ago about doing these one-piece molds, they said, how much, you know, it was the same weight issue again. They want to know how heavy the wings were. And I said, well, it kind of all depends on how you construct your wing, because you can do a variety of different things. You can put carbon fiber in certain spots to reinforce your wing, especially at the base. And I don't recommend doing nylon screws or nylon bolts. I've seen guys use 632s, nylon bolts bolting their wings on, which is absolutely ridiculous. But the other thing is, you really don't want, at least in my experience, you don't want to bolt all the way through the wing. My bolts, or my screws, my 440 screws, nylon screws, only go through the inside half of the wing. They do not go all the way through to the outside. Some guys will bolt all the way through the wing and then put a nylon nut on the backside. No, you don't want to do that, because that's giving the wing too much of a purchase point, so that when and if you do blow over, or, you know, somebody, you know, runs through your wings, that's going to have it affixed to your hull so hard that it is going to rip something. But by God, by all means, do not use 632s to affix your wings to the hull. But like I say, we're gonna get into all of that as we progress here, because like I say, I'm doing these videos as I'm doing a couple of builds. I'm actually kind of psychotic. I'm actually doing like 4 builds at once. But the thing of it is, one of the builds is almost completely done. I'm just finishing out the cockpit and the scoop and the cowl, because I am uber anal about a lot of things, accuracy being one of them. And I will tell you without mincing words that there is not a single person out there, single manufacturer, single person, whatever, that has gotten the Circus Clown Frown cowls right. And I'll tell you why. Because the Circus Clown Frown cowls, even though, you know, you see the clown frown on this air scoop, all of those cowls are not the same. The contours are very different. Okay, the 8700 hull, the all pink, almost all pink boat, that particular cowl is not vented on the backside, although it should be, is not vented on the backside, and it basically hugs up right to the back of, almost right to the back of the windshield. The 88 UOO, which is the other Circus that year, and I've done that story a number of times, but it's the 8401 hull. That's the one that you saw on all the ESPN reels that flipped over in San Diego in '88. John Prevost, in fact, he drove both Circus boats in 1988. But he drove the one that flipped on the backside at San Diego with the Madison. And the cowl on the 88 UOO is vented on the backside. But then you flash forward to the 89. The 89 is set farther back. The contours where the scoop meets the rest of the cowl is drastically different than it was in 88. And I noticed this when I was making one-offs, or actually I was starting to make a mold of the cowl for the 88 school bus boat. Now the 88 school bus, or excuse me, the 89 school bus boat and the 89 Pink Lady, the primary boat, which is what these wings are for, the cowls are very much not the same. The contours where the scoop meets the rest of the cowl is very different, okay? Plus, like I say, there is a big setback off of the back of the windshield to the edge of the scoop. The 88 or the 89 school bus does not do that. It's not set back. The edge of the scoop comes right up to the back of the windshield, and it's very much tapered on the backside. It doesn't have that flat. It doesn't have that flat area, and then it doesn't have the. It also doesn't have the flat or the rear vent like the 89 Pink Lady does. It does have a vent, but it's very different. I've got a million pictures of all of that stuff, and be glad to show it to you if you ever want to see it, because I know there's some circus nuts out there like me. I trade information with you guys all the time. What's his name? Aaron Johnson, Brad Maglinger. I trade circus info with a lot of dudes because they know that I'm like, I don't know. I'm kind of uber anal about that team. And like I say, Chip being one of my boyhood heroes, circus has kind of been one of my faves for a long time, even when Chip wasn't driving, which the other wings over there that we have talked about before that are going on the 93, Dave Vilwalk, who was Chip's crew chief in 89 and 90, 88, 89, 90. Dave was the crew chief for Muncie Lucero Racing, or Muncie Racing. In any case, so yeah, I trade info with you guys all the time. All right, so there we are. We're all wetted out. So we just need to let this cure. And then this being the 206, it's going to be a while, but we needed some long working time. See that? There's that blemish right there. That'll all get filled with resin right there. So by the time you're ready to trim this and finish sand it, that blemish will be gone. That'll be flat. You'll sand right over the top of that. A little bit of air in there. We'll get that air out of there. But even if we don't, it doesn't matter, because we're still going to go back. And once you've done some finish sanding, you're going to have a couple of pinholes here and there. Nothing too terribly major. But still, you're going to go back with some polyester glazing putty, and we're going to fix any holes that show up during during finish sanding. All right, so there it is. We're going to let that cure, and then we're going to come back to it and trim it. And in the next video, we'll get to the point of where we're going to mount these to a parting board and get ready to apply surface primer. All right, so get out there in your garage. Do like I do, man. Turn your TV on, get some Hawaii Five-0 or Yellowstone, or that's my particular playlist. I'm kind of weird that way, but whatever. Get your playlist going on Prime or Netflix or whatever, and get to building, man. So I'm gonna go let these cure. I'm gonna set this aside, and then I'm gonna start working on some other stuff. So until the next video, get to work.